This week on the agenda, after a diplomatically frantic 2025, what might 2026 hold for the future of the relationship between China and Europe? 2025 was a busy year for diplomatic trips between China and Europe. China's Foreign Minister Wang visiting Germany, France, the UK and Belgium, to name but a few. And the likes of France's President Macron, Spain's King Felipe and German Foreign Minister Johann Wadephul heading to Beijing. 2026 looks set for more of the same. But what exactly is at stake in discussions between two of the world's largest trading powers? With me now are Ambassador Piet, former chair of the Europe-Asia Centre, Lanxin Xiang, Zijiang Chair Professor at East China Normal University, Joerg Wuttke, partner at the Albright Stonebridge Group, and Elvire Fabry, senior researcher in geopolitics of trade at the Jacques Delors Institute. Thank you, all of you, for coming on the agenda. Ambassador, let's start with you, because I mentioned there this extremely busy shuttle diplomacy between Europe and China in 2025. What do you think that says about the current state of relations between China and Europe?
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And to answer your question, if you ask me, in an historic perspective, I think the current relationship is good, and I would say even steadily getting better and warming. So we are certainly not on a collision course in terms of, a relationship between EU and China. If you ask me to be more specific on the bilateral relationship, I would call it rather pragmatic at the moment. It's very cautious, and it's certainly shaped by the wider geopolitical competition we are now in today. So I would call it, we are in a crucial stage, and in 2027, I'm really look forward to further improving that relationship. This relationship is not just bilateral at the moment. It's not just between Brussels or Beijing, or between Beijing and different capitals of the member states, but it's also very much influenced by the US policy under the Trump administration, and trying to push the EU. The consequence is that the EU has to take positions on what we would call, a greater autonomy of the EU as such, being more independent from the US and from Beijing, and also to be a more resilient economy. So this is how I see it today. Of course, as you mentioned, we are now in the 50th anniversary of the diplomatic relations. So a lot of activities took place in 2025 to celebrate this event, which I find myself as one of the major events the last 50 years in the relationship between China and Europe. So I leave it for this at the moment.
So pragmatic, cautious. Lanxin, would you agree with that assessment about the relationship between China and Europe in particular?
Yes, generally I would say I agree. But there is a major problem here, is that I do believe this relationship was made unnecessarily complicated, mainly on the part of the European Commission. I pointed out the von der Leyen regime, which I think had made a lot of mistakes, mistakes in the sense of strategic miscalculations. Miscalculate Trump, miscalculate the relationship between China and the EU in general, and I guess this is the next year will be crucial for EU to do some more. That's my personal view. More readjustment. China need to do a readjustment too, especially in the excessive trade surplus. But in geopolitical sense, Europe is falling behind the curve of what is happening in the United States. They don't understand Trump revolution.
Yes. Jörg, let's dig into those trade issues a little bit more. I mean, what's your outlook on frictions, like this new EU customs duties on small parcels, which is going to hit platforms like Xiang and Temu, not to mention, of course, the ongoing rows over Chinese electric vehicles?
Well, it's true that we are actually falling behind. We are still building cars, and China is building mobile phones on wheels. But I think the German companies, particularly BMW, Mercedes, and Volkswagen, are catching up in China. Mercedes just brought out a new car about 2 weeks ago that actually matches the price level of BYD and Xiaomi. And Volkswagen is going to come up with 20 new models in China next year, which is very interesting because, again, these are cars designed in China, made in China. So as a matter of fact, it's a German brand, but everything is Chinese, which is a problem for Ursula von der Leyen and the German government, of course, because is it still a German brand? Is it still a German-made car, or is it completely Chinese? And so these companies actually become more Chinese. They will compete against Chinese brands in other markets. But the challenge is that the car, if you produce it at 100 in Germany, it is produced at 50 in China. So in a way, we really have to take notice that we have a not very competitive landscape in Europe and have to learn from that fact.
It's interesting you talk about the landscape not being that competitive. And Elvire, I wonder what you think here, because when Germany's foreign minister, Johann Wadephul, was in Beijing in December and met China's commerce minister, Wang, they pledged to support free trade, didn't they, to safeguard the multilateral trading system and strengthen dialogue. So what's that going to look like?
The Europeans have always been very supportive of free trade, of multilateralism. So there's nothing new, and in the current framework, with all the measures that came from the United States, there's of course a great concern with the risk to have some new trade barriers adopted or implemented in third countries, and there could be a domino effect also between third countries, just to try to shield themselves against new coercive measures. And I think that's the Europeans and Brussels and Beijing are really aligned on the fact that they want to preserve a functioning globalization. But there is a great difference between the understanding also of the conditions to preserve that globalization between Beijing and Brussels. Of course, there's nothing. I mean, it's not a breakthrough to consider that the Europeans have some historical concerns with the opening of the Chinese market and the lack of reciprocity between the European market and the Chinese market. We know very well all those concerns. They have been raised by Brussels for the past years. And if we want to be able to sustain a functional globalization, a functional free trade, we also need to address more the reciprocity requests that are raised by Brussels.
What about those areas where there has been engagement? Shortly, China's going to be finalising its 15th five-year plan to span 2026 through to 2030, and we know that there's going to be an intense focus on the green trajectory. So, Piet, when it comes to climate, how do China's and Europe's thoughts align?
Yeah, I think strategically, I think they are aligned. I mean, we had in Europe until recently, if I may say, the Green Deal, which was one of the the flagship projects of the von der Leyen Commission, the von der Leyen Commission 1. And of course, the problem is, on the one hand, we had this strategy, and I think there was enough support for it politically. But on the other hand, for implementing the strategy, we needed to have access to those critical materials which are not in Europe but in China. So we were in a bit of in a very bad situation. So I think it's one of the reasons why cooperation on climate change and on what we call, the green transition is absolutely crucial, more for Europe than for China. So we need to revisit our strategy on the Green Deal. What are we going to do? I mean, the fact that that now we are flooded, the market is flooded with EVs from China. I think this was predictable. This was predictable, and we were unprepared, completely unprepared. And I think this is a major strategic mistake from the Commission side. On the other hand, as I said, I mean, our two strategies, we are probably the only two big powers, EU and China, to believe indeed in climate change and that measures need to be taken drastically and urgently.
Lanxin, technology, but both green and otherwise, make up a vital part of growth plans for China and also for Europe. How do you see that competition playing out?
Well, for EV, I would say, I think the picture is clear. I don't think Europe is able to catch up in a serious way. Now, technologically speaking, I would say the competition is mainly between China and the United States. Europeans, unfortunately, again, I'm talking about the Commission, I'm talking even the military organization, the two institutions in Brussels are marginalizing themselves the last, 10 years or so. I would say maybe you can call it falling between two stools on the hard ground, especially on the question of technology. The only thing I agree totally is that the green technology, the climate change, is the only thing that has a very solid ground between Europe and China. But I do not see Europeans being competitive seriously in the high-tech AI and so on. They're missing opportunity one more time.
Elvire, talking about AI and innovation in that regard, would you agree? Because when it comes to collaboration in AI, there are national security concerns, aren't there, on both sides?
Yeah, well, first of all, maybe I would make a distinction. If we're talking about disruptive technologies, yeah. We're talking about AI. We're talking also about quantum computing, biotech, and I think that in quantum and biotech, Europeans are more advanced than in AI, but they have some very interesting innovation and increasing capacities. Then, if we focus more on AI. Of course, AI can be considered a dual-use technology because it's not only the infrastructure, it's the way it is used, all the apps that are developed with AI. And so it is expanding quite broadly the scope of dual-use technologies. Yes, it is raising some issues about national security, notably for all the intangible tech transfers, which is harder to assess, to prevent, and it requests today. Not only from the Europeans, but from the Chinese, from all the countries, to calibrate their own strategy about the use of AI and about the dependencies that they can develop with the use of not only the use of foreign technologies, but the dependencies to foreign supply. If they don't have some domestic industrial capacity, and I think that's one question that I would add to this point is that China and Europe are two big blocs and having a strong impact on the global economy, and that we have the responsibility also to engage into framing this use of AI and and the risks and of imbalances that could create the huge dependency of the rest of the world to some producer of AI and other disruptive technologies.
Jörg, is it too late for Europe to catch up, or are there opportunities for collaborations and partnerships to close that gap?
Well, being based in Washington, of course, I see it from the American point of view. And yes, Europe has been falling behind tremendously, overregulated, too high prices in energy, too high prices in labor cost and so forth. And Europe is really running a risk of being squished by China and the United States. And we became basically also a victim of the trade war which started between the US and China. Look at this availability of rare earth, for example. So I think the reckoning for us in Europe should be that we have to deregulate, that we have to look into our cost structure in order to become competitive again. And the to-do list is clearly the Draghi report in order to catch up. So we are behind, and it's painful to see from the vantage point of here that Europe finds it very difficult in order to get going. But I think we still have a lot of assets. We have great brains, great universities. We have in particular very strong small and medium-sized enterprise landscape that can help us to catch up. So we have all the abilities to actually come up again and be competitive with China and the United States. But at this stage, we are certainly behind.
We'll pause there for a moment, but do stay with us, as still to come here on the agenda, the importance of people, why cultural exchanges could be key to China and Europe's relationship in 2026.
We are all connected. Across borders, across continents, connected by ideas, a shared humanity. Stay connected.
Welcome back to the agenda. And let's continue now with our discussion on the future of relations between China and Europe in 2026. Still with me are Ambassador Piet, former chair of the Europe-Asia Centre, Lanxin Xiang, Zijiang Chair Professor at East China Normal University, Joerg Wuttke, partner at the Albright Stonebridge Group, and Elvire Fabry, senior researcher in geopolitics of trade at the Jacques Delors Institute. Lanxin, let's talk about geopolitics and diplomacy, because there are expected to be efforts by France during its G7 presidency this year for dialogue between the EU and China. Is China getting the solid political guarantees for bilateral relations that Wang Yi spoke about in the strategic dialogue that took place between China and France in October?
Well, it looks good. Again, I'm not sure. I'm not sure about the substance. China always prefer Gaullism. They love this. They consider what Europeans call the strategic autonomy. Basically, it's another version of Gaullism, Euro-Gaullism. It used to be that China preferred that kind of way of thinking because they can make them distance itself from Washington. Now, the playbook is totally different. Europeans still play the old playbook. Let's say high-tech, issue, so-called national security issue for Europe, but Americans are changing their perspective on what defines American national security, as you read the recent NSC. The other thing is that the French also played old playbook by emphasizing on the issues such as Ukraine, Chinese attitude, but these issues are passé. I have to say, because Washington does not care about that issue. The national security strategy did not even mention Russia being a pacing threat. China certainly is no longer an existential threat. So Europeans still play that kind of game. I doubt what Macron intends to do can actually achieve, but I wish it can. I wish it can.
Well,
Yes.
well, Piet, would you agree with that? Because when President Macron was in China in December, he and President Xi Jinping issued that joint statement, didn't they, on the situations in both Gaza and Ukraine. I mean, how important a signal is that? I mean, that Europe and China can work together as peacekeepers.
Yeah, I think this is a very important signal, and I hope there are more signals in the coming months. What I disagree with Mr. Lanxin, and it's the importance of Ukraine for Europe. This is an existential problem for Europe. This is not just a war, a regional war. I know that the Americans have another view, but I believe, that the relationship even between Europe and China could be much better and could be improved if there was a better dialogue on Ukraine between EU and China. I think this is something that China should understand. This is something about the future of Europe. I know what the Americans are thinking. I'm very, very disgusted by what the Americans are doing at the moment with Ukraine. This is not serious. This is not serious. This is against all the values we have been sharing with the Americans. So I hope that the Chinese now, and I think in a spirit of renewal of our relationship, that we can have an open dialogue with China on these matters, which are of a very substantial and existential nature for Europe.
Yeah, to what extent do you think that or see China positioning itself as a more reliable partner for Europe, beyond the more traditional relationship with the US? I mean, multilateralism was, of course, that core tenet of China's next 5-year plan, wasn't it?
Well, I mean, we have to reckon as Europeans that we have been falling behind. I mean, it's G2, it's US, China, and the trade war, which started actually quite substantially in rare earth and in technology, basically has subsided. But the victims clearly are also European companies. And we have to just reckon that we have not been as relevant as we hope to be. I completely agree with Piet about the importance of the Ukraine war for us Europeans. It's just very painful as a European, particularly in the US, to see that we have been falling behind quite tremendously. Again, it's up to us in order to fix that.
Would you agree with that, those power games? I wonder how you see the relationships between the US, the EU and China changing in 2026.
Of course, the reliability of the US concerning the support that it will continue to bring to Ukraine is also a huge concern for the Europeans. In a way, what we could consider is that this new situation is it's just leading us to consider that we may be missing the opportunity for more closer cooperation between the EU and China. If we're talking notably about technology transfers, you must have noticed that this is a rising issue in the European debate. And for the Europeans, if we're lagging behind in some technological sector, we also expecting now to have a more, to flip the script and to have more proactive cooperation from Chinese companies to be able also to share some technologies. Because as I was saying initially about the stabilization of globalization as an open market, we also need some rebalancing, and not only to have China as supplying the rest of the world with its exceptional technologies, but also enabling partners to develop them.
We've covered a lot of ground. We've talked about trade and the economy, climate, innovation, geopolitics, but I want to talk about people, because Lanxin, educational exchange has been a really core part of the relationship between China and Europe. And yet, I'm reading that the European Commission is preparing to block Chinese universities from big chunks of its Horizon Europe research programme. And that's going to cover things like health, digital and space. That would be a really big setback, wouldn't it?
Well, this is what they call the de-risking. Now, in my view, this is one of the worst concepts Europeans ever invented since the founding of the European community, because they try to make this technological, international technological diffusion, which has been a historic trend. Nobody can stop it in history, 1,000 years. But they try to make it a national security issue, and following the American argument first, and then they make their own, statement about it. But it's not going to work. First of all, it's never going to work. So maybe the only result is stimulate, just as American side began to realize now. Okay, if you listen to Nvidia CEO, Mr. Jason Wang. He understood perfectly well that you cannot really stop that trend of technological diffusion by just making that argument of national security to cover the real trade concerns. Now, so this is not honest policy for me. It's not a real issue. As again, I'm trying to say, even Americans are changing their mind. So Europeans, as really a junior partner here in this whole tech war business.
Joerg, what would a win-win year look like for the likes of Germany, France and the UK, and indeed China?
I think the win-win, there are very few areas of win-win actually, given the situation we have politically. A win-win is definitely in climate change. We still believe in climate change, unlike what comes out of the White House. We still have a partnership there. China has incredible green technologies. We have very good companies that can feed into these technologies. I think that's one of the few areas where actually I'm optimistic about China-EU.
And Piet, where do you see the real opportunities in the relationship between China and the EU in 2026?
Yeah, I think, I hope that next year there will be a more substantive dialogue on geopolitical matters between EU and China. But I see personally myself a big future in cultural exchanges. That's actually what I'm doing now at the moment. We are building in Brussels maybe for those who are familiar with Brussels, there is a Chinese pavilion in Brussels near the Royal Palace, and this has been there for more than 100 years, but it has been underutilized, and also it needs to be restored. We are restoring that to create a platform for cultural platform, diplomatic platform between China and Belgium and of course Europe. So this is, I believe, in the cultural dialogue and in the people-to-people exchanges. I have been now in China 3 or 4 times the last 4 years, and I must say there's enormous potential also in China to discover China. And the infrastructure is there for the first time. I mean, the way you can travel in China is amazing. The trains, the planes. So I must say, for the first time, China is opening up, culturally speaking, and I think this is a time to seize, and I hope in next year we can make some progress on that. Thank you.
Ambassador Piet Steele, Lanxin Xiang, Joerg Wuttke and Elvire Fabry, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
You can watch every episode of The Agenda in full on CGTN Europe's YouTube channel. And for exclusive extra content from me, my guests and the rest of the team, don't forget to check out @The Agenda Show on TikTok.
Coming up on a future agenda, the economics of loneliness. In a world more connected than ever, what are the real costs of being alone? But for now, from me, Juliet, Mann, and from all the Agenda team here in London, goodbye.